I now yield 3 minutes to my friend from Virginia, Mr. Bob Good, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing. Thanks to our witnesses. I think it's laughable, to use a term that was used by one of our panelists already, the notion that Congress will have the wherewithal to reform mandatory spending when we have zero demonstrated willingness to cut our discretionary spending at a time, think about where we are today, at a time we have historic deficits, we have historic debt to GDP, historic inflation, historic interest rates, historic interest payment on the debt, the amount we're paying just to pay the interest on the debt, and historic downgrading of our debt. And yet we have no demonstrated willingness by this Congress to cut our spending on the discretionary side. And I wish I had a nickel to help the deficit, but every time I've heard this year, with our Republican majority, oh, it's not discretionary, it's mandatory, as an excuse for our unwillingness to deal with discretionary. Gosh, if we just didn't fund the stuff that's not authorized, or if we didn't fund the stuff that's not on a constitutional role of the federal government, that's a foreign concept here, obviously. But the snowball effect now, the snowball effect, it's going so fast now. The unprecedented debt, the monthly deficit of over $200 billion now, the interest rates, it's causing the debt to swell and surge like we've never seen before. We're on track as a Republican majority to have, a year from now, a $36 trillion in debt by next year's election. You know, we took 200 years to reach $1 trillion in debt, and we got $36 trillion in debt now 40 years later. Thank goodness I guess we had the unlimited increase of the debt ceiling, so as much as we can spend and grow the deficit, we don't have any limit to it till January 25. But it would seem that since all the discretionary spending, that's, all of it, all $1.7 trillion or so, it's all deficit spending, it's all borrowed, again with a $2.5 trillion deficit, that we'd be willing to cut or reduce some of it, but we don't even have a consensus now. We don't even have a consensus now on to comply at least with the $1.59 trillion that was the FRA levels, passed by 2/3 of both houses, signed by the president. We don't even have a consensus that will be the top line level for the remainder of this year. We're going to vote on no appropriations bills this week in our majority. The president signed, again, that level, and both houses voted for it. We don't even have an agreement to do that level. So no demonstrated interest in cutting our spending with the Republican majority, let alone, of course, it wasn't even talked about the previous 2 years that I was here in the Democrat majority. I guess maybe it's progress, Mr. Chairman, that we're at least fighting over to some degree, if unsuccessfully, on cutting our spending. We can't even get agreement in both houses to pay for supplementals. That we wouldn't further exacerbate the issue we're talking about today, but we can't even get consensus in here to pay for supplementals, let alone on the House floor or in our friends across on the Senate. If not now, when? If not us, who? Do some of us just lack an understanding? Do some of us just lack a care about what this will do? Mr. Chairman said, in addition to the border, this is the issue that will crush and destroy the country. And none of the commissions matter. Whichever one's better, none of them matter unless we're willing to implement them. So I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I think the gentleman for Virginia, I agree with his sentiments. The speaker, I will say, our new speaker, I'm encouraged by his willingness to set a precedent that we will, in fact, pay for emergency supplementals. And I thought that was a really good sign, and I hope we can build on that. It was historic, and I would like to now yield to my friend, also